throughout the metropolitan area, and particularly our region. So thank you for spending your evening with us to learn about your community, the things that impact you, the things that are concerning to you, and we'll give you an opportunity to ask specific questions of us. I did not show up here alone. I brought up reinforcement because typically when we see a crowd this large, it's because people are motivated because they have a gripe or they have a complaint. So if you're here to gripe or complain, we'll listen to your concerns. If you're here just to learn about what's going on, again, we thank you for your time because it's active citizens like you that are participating in your community, that are investing in your time, that will come back to you and be rewarded later. So without any further, my name is Dave Marshak. I'm your elected sheriff, here to talk about the sheriff's office and crime and homelessness and some of the things that impact this community. Also with me is a former resident of this high school, Lieutenant Colonel Tim Whitney. Some of you may know him. Good news, he represented your area in scholastic testing as a child, and now he's in charge of our budget. So that's good. That's good news for us. Also with the Sheriff's Department is Lisa Flamian. Just recently, we hired our first mental health professional for crisis response, and she's here to maybe answer some questions because I know we've had some mental health issues or some things that we're concerned about in the Cedar Hill area, and I brought her as well. Our elected prosecuting attorney, Tricia Stefanski, is here. She can provide insight sometimes on the criminal justice system from a different perspective that maybe I don't offer. And I know she spoke with some of the Citizens Persist group a couple of weeks ago and maybe provided some insight there. She'll be available as well. And then Brian Haskins from County Council District 1 is with us. Brian. Vicki James, County Council District 7 is here as well, and that's her district here. And then also Renee Reuter from County Council District number 2. In the absence of Jim Terry, Renee filled in and was getting herself up to speed and familiar with some of the issues here in Cedar Hill. So let's just give a quick overview. Welcome. You live here, so you obviously know a little bit about the county. Jefferson County, here we are in Cedar Hill. Latest census population was 225 to 228. I heard a number this morning of 226,000 residents. The whole east side of our county is bordered by the Mississippi River, of course, and then we have St. Genevieve, St. Francis counties, Washington County, Franklin County, and St. Louis County that we border up to the north. Sheriff's Office covers 93.34% of the land area. So the Sheriff's Office is responsible for this giant area. Next to it, next closest up, is the city of Arnold with 11.94 square miles. So you can see that the Sheriff's Office is the primary law enforcement agency for a huge area. And what you might not know is Jefferson County is larger land-wise than St. Louis County that has 534 square miles. So we are covering a huge area that makes a difference in some of our response times. We are an internationally accredited agency. Oftentimes when you see police departments fail in St. Louis County, around the country or in Jefferson County, they didn't have a solid standards, they don't have policies, procedures, monitoring the way that they do business. And I'm very proud that your Sheriff's Office is one of only 2 in the entire state as far as sheriff's offices that are internationally accredited. You have other municipal police departments that are internationally accredited throughout the region, of course, the country, but it's something that you can be proud of. The Sheriff's Office has 2 primary commands. Most of what you see, and typically is the representative of our county government, is right up here in terms of the uniform patrol. They are the most visible members of our department. When you have an issue or a concern or a call for service, you typically get an officer that's coming out of that uniform patrol. Of course, we also have, investigations, special operations, and a number of different things that fall within that category. But one thing you may not be aware of is the fact that we have statutory responsibility over many other things. Statutorily, we are responsible for a 334-bed facility in our jail, where we have inmates that will range. Sometimes our population can drop down to the 180s. Currently, it's 305, and I've seen it swell as the high as 380 inmates. We're also responsible for all the jail subcategories, which includes the courts, prisoner transport. We're responsible for bringing inmates back across the entire country that have felony warrants, where it's not unusual for us to transport from both coasts. I will tell you that we've never had one in Hawaii, but as soon as we do, I'm going to volunteer for it. It's just never happened. So don't worry, I haven't been traveling to Hawaii in your tax dollars, because we've never had a prisoner be located in Hawaii. We're also responsible for civil process, and I'll talk about some of those things as we proceed. But over here is, again, your primary law enforcement response, and that's typically what you see from us. You may not have a thorough understanding, but the reason I put this up here is to explain to you that we have many, many obligations spread out over an incredible amount of responsibilities, both statutorily and then also things that we do just to provide decent services to our community. Manpower. Sometimes we'll talk about this. Sometimes I see jaws drop, sometimes not. We can talk about that. I'll be certainly available to answer questions about that. But take a look over here in the uniform patrol. For the uniform patrol for all of Jefferson County, we have 4 platoons. Our deputies work 12-hour shifts. For example, they will work Monday and Tuesday on duty. They'll have Wednesday and Thursday off duty, and then they will work Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So it gives them the opportunity to have every other weekend off. It works out well for us for scheduling. It works out well for the officers to get some downtime. But if you take a look at that number, 22, just keep that in mind for a few minutes as I go through, and I'll show you some more slides. Of course, we have crimes against persons and property. Our detectives are busy. I know they're looking for a deceased person right now that they have information on related to an earlier investigation. They're working a fire right now. I think there's a number of different disturbances and fights going on in the county on my way in. It was a busy day this morning. I don't think we had a car available in the entire county on my way to work. It was 7 a.m. and there was not a free car. We started stacking calls. Disturbances, fights, domestics, you name it, carried over from some of it from earlier this morning, so we can get busy. So there's the manpower for criminal investigations, special operations. A lot of these, for example, the SWAT team is not a full-time assignment. Those officers are pulled from a number of different divisions when we do have SWAT operations. And so all those things impact the road. And then you can see on the administrative side. All in total, the Sheriff's Office employs around 250 people. We're a third of the county government, just to provide public safety for Jefferson County. Assuming each one of those shifts is at full staff of 22, we have to allow officers for training. Do we want a well-trained police department? Yes, we do, right? And that takes time. At any given time, we will either have somebody in training. I think today we had 10 officers rotate through training on suicide prevention, because it turns out it's kind of a big deal in our profession. We lose too many police officers as a result of suicide. We had leadership training 2 weeks ago. Looking forward, I know we have learned, racial bias training to prevent our officers from policing in a racially biased way. Training is part of a constant evolution for us. We will always have officers out for training. And then we offer vacation time, so we have officers out on vacation time. Holiday time, we do not provide our officers overtime on those days, so we give them days off. Of course, comp time, if they work over on a regular shift, they're not paid overtime. They'll earn comp time. We have a number of officers serving in our military. They will take off military time to provide service to our country. And then during the daytime, we have 2 substations. One's up in High Ridge in the Dillon Plaza, and we have one over on the Windsor campus. And so during daytime business hours, we have 2 officers off that platoon that provide those services to the rest of our community. Excuse me. Other manpower losses include court appearance, officers that are testifying in the middle of the day for court. If they worked midnight shift and now they're providing testimony for a criminal case, we may have to give them time back off later in their shift. Public relations events often come from road patrol. We try to really balance that with the importance. As you noticed at the Gurney Enterprises Backstoppers event on Saturday, we had a couple of officers, some of them volunteered their time and others were paid. And then of course SWAT events. We'll end up with about 22 SWAT events a year. It kind of depends on what the operation is and how long that will take. According to FBI, uniform crime reporting nationally, the rate of sworn officers was 2.4 officers per 1,000. The Sheriff's Office currently has 1.5 sworn officers per 1,000. What does that mean for us? What does it mean for you? Longer response times, right? Longer response times. I just checked the number today for unincorporated Jefferson County. I believe it was 177,000 or so residents that we are directly responsible for in unincorporated county. If we were to be up to the national standard, Jefferson County doesn't have the money to do that, number one. But if they did, it would be another 22 million. Our budget this year that we submitted is around 24 million. So to give you an idea of where we should be and the cost associated with that, it's incredibly high. Now, I could be rude and call out our county council members and ask them to step in because they're right here, rah-rah, but the truth is they don't have the money and they support us. The fact is, just based on the fact that we are a bedroom community to St. Louis, and so many of our residents travel to St. Louis and commute every day to perform business, Jefferson County does not have the businesses that generate the funds to really support those things. So we do very well with what we have, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But I did want to share that with you. In Jefferson County, we're at 1.5 sworn officers, and nationally it's 2.4. Sector assignments. This is how the assignments are broken up in Jefferson County, where deputies patrol. This evening, for example, in this sector right here, our A sector up in High Ridge, there are 2 deputies. In Sector B, there are 2 deputies. Sector C, 2 deputies. D, E, F, G, H, I, J, all have 1 deputy assigned to them. Does that surprise you? It usually does. I used to share some numbers in the past when I was a lieutenant and zone commander. I had some bosses tell me, don't do that anymore. You scare people. But I wanted to give you a realistic idea of what's going on out there. Now, tonight, there are 16 cars out there answering calls for service, providing services. I know a couple of detectives are out on other calls for service. I think one of them is doing an investigation, like I said. Another one is looking for a deceased person related to another investigation. Around 4 times per shift, every 12 hours, a deputy will go from one of these areas, or a couple of these areas, down to Hillsborough for booking, and somebody had to be arrested. I know at shift change at 6 p.m., there was a couple of deputies on domestic disturbance. They were going to require relief from the first 2 cars that could assist them. Because in the domestic situation, the male and female were so violent, the deputy couldn't transport them together, and it was going to take 2 patrol cars out of the street down to Hillsborough for a transport. 2020 statistics for Jefferson County. Calls for service, 69,000. I will tell you, when it comes to public safety, there's a number of different ways to manipulate numbers. Those numbers came from Jefferson County 911. Some police departments that we're familiar with, if they serve a prisoner a meal at their police station, that's a call for service. If they stop a car, there's 3 people in there, that's a call for service. I've seen the numbers move a million different ways, but those numbers came from Jefferson County 911 in terms of our calls for service, people asking for our assistance and our response in 2020. You can see that we responded to 35 rapes, 16 robberies, 12 arson, 448 assaults, 969 cases of domestic violence, 533 burglaries, over 1,400 stealings, and 479 vehicle thefts. Part 2 crimes, the forgeries, liquor offenses, narcotics violations, 605, recovered stolen vehicles, 548, 94 sex offenses, trespassing, 215, and weapons offenses. Now, obviously, that's a snapshot of some of those calls. It doesn't include all the different things that go on, whether it's recovered property, whether it's child custody transfers. We've had a couple of missing people just this week. Small children, one of them was taken without the parents' consent. Matter of fact, I think 2 of them this week have already been taken without the parents' consent. And that can occupy a lot of our time very quickly, particularly if we believe that there's an element of danger in there. And so you can see that it's maybe not just sitting around, hanging out, waiting for a call to come by for service, that these officers are pretty busy. On the civil process side, because you do see some of those cars driving around back and forth, and sometimes they will go car to car. Every now and then I'll get a complaint where I see 2 cars sitting car to car together, and they're talking or transferring paperwork. Our civil process section served over 8,700 papers. Those are garnishments, civil judgments, evictions. That can take a while, so our civil process division is incredibly busy as well. That's my little slide I added today. This is where you get truth bullets. Now, it's a joke around our office because we talk about these, where we have to shoot truth bullets from time to time. And I'm going to shoot some with you right now. Everything is prioritized. From calls for service, the supervisor, the watch commander out on the street right now is determining who gets the fastest response based on the types of calls that are coming out. Okay? So if it's in progress, for example, a burglary in progress, that's a priority call. A burglary where somebody returns home and they discover that somebody had broken into the house, and they have, say for example, a firearm, and they've cleared their house, they made sure nobody else is inside their house, and they call to report that to the sheriff's department. So they had a burglary at my house, but nobody's in my house. There's no threat of danger, etc. That call automatically gets dropped down further, and the ones that happen in progress keep building up. Okay? That's how we prioritize calls for services. Now, this is nothing new. This happens to every law enforcement agency, depending on how many calls for service they have, depending on how busy they are. That's what happens. When it comes to investigations, and all those reports that are generated from the police officers responding to the calls for service, they go to our detective bureau. Do you remember how many detectives were out there?
6.
Not just tonight, but right, you had 6 doing regular case investigations. 12 doing regular case investigations. They have to prioritize those investigations as well. Homicides, sex offenses. You saw there's 35 rapes last year, 94 sex offenses. Oftentimes victims don't. By the way, suspects in sex offenses, do you think they're hanging out waiting for us to come interview them? No. We have to go find them a lot of times because they know the consequences when we catch up with them, right? And so a lot of these cases take a lot of time. We've got sex offenses, the suspicious missing persons, the child abuse. All those things are prioritized by those investigators every single day, depending on what happens. I guarantee you, we messed up some detective schedules in the last couple of weeks. If you've seen the news and seen some of the things that have happened, where they went to work that day and they planned on, making some return phone calls, reaching out to somebody in a burglary, going for a homicide, a shooting, a stabbing, hostage, whatever it is, right? All those things happen, and all those resources constantly get pulled. We're constantly prioritizing. And it's not just us, by the way. If your car gets broken into and we are successful in lifting fingerprints, we compare that to others. If we get some DNA samples, depending on the type of crime, when it goes to the lab, the crime lab is prioritizing all those cases as well. As a matter of fact, the Missouri State Highway Patrol Crime Lab will no longer take touch DNA for us on property crimes. Now, I don't want to go too deep into DNA, but as I sat here and drank my water, I left some DNA around this lid. I discarded after a burglary. That's an easy piece of evidence for us to obtain. We do a little swab on it, we package it properly, send it to the lab, and if you've been arrested for a felony, you've served time in the Department of Corrections, we send it through CODIS. It's a simple match, and that's how we start the investigation. Everybody clear on that? Highway Patrol, their lab's so overwhelmed, they don't take those anymore. If somebody burglarizes your house, they leave a beer can in there, they're not going to process that. Hopefully I have a plan for that at some point. I'd like to see our crime lab expanded. Medical examiner's office had a meeting with the medical examiner's office the other day. Jefferson County, if we haven't heard, has an opioid crisis. Too many of our residents are dying as a result of opioids, narcotics overdoses. We have overwhelmed the medical examiner system to where they don't do an autopsy on all the deaths. They're prioritizing deaths. Think about that. We don't have enough board-certified forensic pathologists to do the autopsies that we want. You guys follow me? It's not just, it's the entire system. The entire system is stressed, and we have to prioritize everything. Our prosecutors prioritize cases. I know our prosecuting attorney. She's a tough one, if you haven't heard. She likes to prosecute bad people. But she doesn't have the resources she needs. She has to prioritize cases. So you would think sometimes if you have a suspect identified, if you have some of those cases, that's a guaranteed slam dunk, and that is not the case. I want you to understand that. And again, I started this presentation in this little section talking about truth bullets. This is the one where I kind of depress you a little bit, and I just say, here's the reality of our situation. And I would rather tell you the truth than blow smoke. Okay? Because I want you to understand how this impacts everything. Judges, they weigh on court rules. I know some citizens Persist have been active on this when they weren't happy with a judge recently that reduced the bond. Judges have a difficult job to determine that sometimes. And then, of course, the Department of Corrections, they weigh the value of incarceration. So just because we get somebody convicted, we do the legwork and they go to the Department of Corrections, we have zero control over that. Department of Corrections is going to prioritize and determine who should stay and who should go out of their facility. Now, if you've seen anything in Department of Corrections recently, do you think they're building more Department of Corrections to house more people? I'll help you out. No, if you haven't seen that, no. They're kicking them out, right? You've heard of this disincarceration narrative. Yeah, they're coming all over Jefferson County, coming all over the entire region. You might have heard us complain about the catch and release, right? Well, listen, there's a lot of conversation out there on how bad the police are, etc. There's this disincarceration narrative where everyone's saying we have too many people incarcerated and we need to get them out the door. I'm familiar with our jail population. I'm familiar with populations out there. We do have a large population that is incarcerated. Quite honestly, a good portion of them most need to be there, right? They did bad things. They violated the rules. No one's sitting in our jail for smoking marijuana, by the way, okay? So just so for some perspective. And the people that are in our jail, again, a police officer was a witness, or we have credible witnesses, that completed an affidavit of cooperation. The police officer completed a report and investigation, sent it to our prosecuting attorney's office. They looked at it. Now, before the prosecutor completes a warrant application, right, and is getting charges issued, do you think the prosecutor wants to win or lose that case? Win. Wants to win, right? Haven't you seen how prosecutors get elected? They win cases, right? So the prosecutor is going to review it, and then that case goes to a judge to determine if there's going to be a bond or not. There is a process, right, before we incarcerate somebody. And so oftentimes they're getting released before they should, and here's why. New Supreme Court rules. Take a look at this. I'll read it for you if you can't see it. The court must start with non-monetary conditions of release and and may impose monetary conditions only if necessary, and only in an amount not exceeding that necessary to ensure safety or that the defendant's appearance. The court may not order a defendant to pay any portion of the cost of any conditions of release without first considering how to minimize or whether to waive those costs. A court may order a defendant pre-trial detention only if it determines by clear and convincing evidence that no combination of non-monetary and monetary conditions will ensure. That's how to get out of jail free card, right? Unless you are clear, if there's clear evidence that you are going to be a problem to society in a dangerous way, they're going to send you right back out the door. Is that a problem? Yeah. I agree. So, I mention that because I see sometimes, well, it's the police department doesn't want to do anything. The prosecuting attorney's office does not want to prosecute crimes, and therefore this. It's the judges. I've heard it all. I see it all. I mean, some of you may have said it. The fact is, there are a lot of rules governing what happens in the justice system. Our criminal justice system is designed, in many ways, to protect the accused. Right? I mean, the whole criminal justice system is designed not for the victim, it's for the accused, to make sure government doesn't overstep its bounds, and the thought that it's better to allow a guilty person free than to wrongfully convict somebody that it shouldn't. That's the entire basis of our criminal justice system. And so when you think about it that way, you can see why there's more checks and balances that protect the accused than it does you as a victim. Follow me? You don't have to like it. I just want you to understand, right? If we have questions about it, I brought some local experts with me. Derek Good is here too. He deals with that. I'll point him out. Department of Corrections, I think I mentioned this, reduced their prison population from 2017 to 2020 by 7,000. It saved them more than $13 million in staffing, etc. Cedar Hill crime. Let's take a look. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that slide. Good, bad. It's about the same. It fluctuates a little bit. You know, in terms of the crime and some of the things that we're seeing, it's starting to become a little bit more noticeable with some of the homeless and some of the other things that are happening. But if you look at all of our calls for service, it's not crazy. I mean, it's not as much as you want. It's not as much as I want. But crime throughout Jefferson County, actually last time we checked, was actually down in most categories. That's good news, because that is not the case in counties north of us. Drug incidents through our narcotics investigations unit. Down here in Cedar Hill, you can see a little bit difference. If you can't read it, and I didn't bring my readers, so I can't even read it. Where am I looking over here? This is a little blurry. It's not even my fault anymore. Drug investigations in Cedar Hill, you can see that we spent some time there for the population. I'll let you take a look at that real quick. Overall, crime in Jefferson County is slightly down, but as we are learning, we are facing more and more challenges. Crime is more complex. The underlying issues are complex. And there are some real challenges for all of us. And by the way, I do not live in Cedar Hill, but I live in Jefferson County. Most of our deputies live in Jefferson County. About 98% of our deputies live in Jefferson County. So I know from time to time there's some comments that suggest that we don't care. Nothing could be further from the truth. Our families are down here. Our friends live down here. We have other police officers down here. We care about your community because we are part of this community. I just captured this as I was working on the presentation from Fox 2, and by the way, there's a lot of reasons I don't trust media, but it seems like they did the work. So St. Charles County has the area's lowest crime rate. If you take a look at that, they were looking at Missouri State Highway Patrol uniform crime rates for 1,000 people in the population. St. Charles County had 20.72 crimes per 1,000 people. St. Louis County had 33.01 crimes per 1,000 people. St. Louis City, you don't live in St. Louis City, 88.39 crimes per 1,000 people. And Franklin County had 29.05 crimes per 1,000 people. And Jefferson County is second with 26.65 crimes per 1,000 people. All things considered, and I kind of laid it out for you, we have a pretty safe community, right? If you leave and you go home tonight and you want to walk around, I feel pretty comfortable you're going to walk around and nothing's going to happen to you. If I walk around my subdivision, I feel comfortable nothing's going to happen to me. Although I am paranoid, so I always have a pistol on me anyway, but I'm just saying. All right, this is an issue for this area. How do I know? I've got some calls. Your council members have had calls. Your county executive has had calls. Our prosecuting attorneys have calls, right? Stop this now. Historically, we have, before we are called to deal with the homeless population, we would be called to address this one right here, the panhandlers, right? They're on the side of the road, they're disheveled, they're old clothes, they're maybe harassing me, or they're a little too aggressive with their sign. And oftentimes, when these complaints would come in from residents of our county, they would call the sheriff's department. I don't like this, I don't like seeing it, I don't like, I don't like the way that they approached me, I felt unsafe, all of these different complaints. But there is one component that we consistently had to remind everybody of, and that these are First Amendment issues, okay? So, rather why, somebody is holding up a sign saying, vote for this candidate, support our school, or I could use some money, it's really all the same, okay? These are First Amendment issues. And so oftentimes the sheriff's office would say, we can't respond to that, or we don't have anything that we can do with that. These are First Amendment issues. And people say, the sheriff's department doesn't want to do anything. No, it's because we understand your constitutional rights, your First Amendment, just like the Second Amendment. We always talk about that one, and you don't have to worry about that either. But on the First Amendment, we want to make sure that we're protecting all your constitutional rights, and the First Amendment is a very important one. And so I will tell you that Tim Whitney and I were driving, a little story. We went up to St. Louis County to go to Costco to buy coffee for the sheriff's office, because we buy that for our employees. And we were exiting, and St. Louis County kicked off the homeless people at the corner, said, get the heck out of here. And we just like, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? But here's the result of that. $150,000. They got a head start, right? But look, these cases are being filed all over the country. That's one of the smaller ones, by the way. It's costing city governments $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 in our neighbors to the east in Illinois. These things are popping up all over. Heck, you get people just wanting to stand out there, wait for the police to kick them off so they can sue the police. All right? That's the reality of the situation. So it's not that we don't want to address it, because, look, oftentimes they'll leave trash there, they'll leave debris by the side of the road. There's different issues that we don't like, but these are First Amendment issues. What about homeless people? Where do they stand in this? Citizens, right? They have constitutional protections as well. Just like you. Just like you. If they're walking down the street, guess what? They deserve the same constitutional protections you do. You may not like it, but sure enough, if If a police department goes and starts harassing people just because they don't like the way they look, the fact that they're disheveled, or that they're walking out of their business and they're dirty, and I'll get to your question in a second. But I will tell you that they can get themselves in real trouble. And we'll talk about what that looks like, what it can and can't. But to be homeless is not a violation of any law. And the U.S. Supreme Court has said so. So when the U.S. Supreme Court, and by the way, that's the framework, right, for everything that we do, right? This is what you can do and this is what you can't do. It governs how we police our citizens, okay? It just does. And so the U.S. Supreme Court has said time and time again, it is not illegal to be homeless. You do not have to live in an apartment. You do not have to live in a house, okay? I want to set the stage for that as we talk about some of these things. In Jefferson County, is it becoming a bigger issue? I think you know the answer to that. Is anybody unsure? We're seeing more and more of it. We're seeing it pop up in different places. Boy, every time I drive through Festus Crystal City, that is really popping up with more homeless people. I think they have a large encampment behind the Festus there, the Festus Walmart. We have an encampment behind the sheriff's office. I know there's one over by the Merrimack River, over off Forest Sandy. Over the years, I've come across people there. It's going to get worse, not better. This is something that we're going to have to deal with as a region, as a community. We will have to address this in some way because it is getting worse. I can see it getting worse throughout Jefferson County in our area. And historically, that's not something we've ever had to deal with. We just had to deal with the panhandlers. But now, it's becoming a little bit more visible in some different areas because people are concerned about, shelter. Some people have been giving tents. And so in the past, I've seen some makeshift forts in the woods, and now you're seeing these things from a great distance because of the bright tent colors, which is going to be more visible in the future. We must work on it now. As I shared, it's not illegal to be homeless. They have a right to move freely. They have the right to be in the same place as all of us. They have a right to hold signs and protest. But I can tell you that I get a lot of these. The sheriff's office does nothing. I know here locally, we have an encampment, so to speak, that's starting to develop a little bit more in MoDOT property, right? And for it to be a crime on MoDOT property, or on any property, we have to have a victim, right? The prosecutor can't prosecute without a victim who will testify. MoDOT will not offer a victim to testify on their behalf that this person is trespassing. So what does that mean? Yeah. And I'm guessing MoDOT's got bigger issues to worry about throughout the state than that, I can assume. But for whatever legal reason, they are choosing not to prosecute. So if you don't have, our prosecuting attorney, if our prosecuting attorney does not have a victim to cooperate in prosecution, there is no crime. Without crime, we are very, very limited in what we can do. Oftentimes when we respond to a complaint, I don't want this person over here, I don't want that, then the next question is, legally, we have to know whether we're protected. Is this your property? Well, no, it's my friend's. Does that work? No, there's a lot of different, I'm happy to turn it over to a prosecutor at any time. There's a lot of different things that they need to prosecute and to be successful, but I will tell you that we have to have the legal authority, because when something goes wrong, and oftentimes it does, we have to have the legal thumbs up behind us, the legal standing to protect us from litigation, to protect us against violating your constitutional rights. There's a number of things that have to fall into place before the officer can take action, because when things go wrong, we have to have that protection. And so it's not that we don't want to take action on something, we have to have the legal standing to do it. And without a victim, we do not have that. So I know they're starting to pop up more and more. I will tell you, in our 2022 budget request we submitted a couple of weeks ago, we asked for an increase from general revenue funds. We haven't had an increase in general revenue funds allocated to the Sheriff's Department since 2016. We are asking for 2 officers to address the homeless issue in Jefferson County. I'm familiar with other programs throughout the country that are very successful, where law enforcement officers help navigate resources for those people that need resources that are available. Many of our homeless population are veterans. They served our country, they served us well. Oftentimes there's a mental health component. Sometimes for our homeless population, there are resources available to them that they didn't even know they had. This has happened to us in the jail with veterans programs that we have in the jail to help people identify those resources. There's oftentimes that, again, resources are available, they just don't even know, or maybe it's a transportation issue. There's a number of things that we can do, but our goal is to identify and collect data on that population in our county to facilitate resources for those in need, especially our veterans, and then address the mental health component. We've already made some investments in mental health at the Sheriff's Department. I've shared with you our jail population has swelled to 380 at times, and I will tell you a good portion of the people that are incarcerated in our jail have a mental health component. Maybe that exacerbated by drug use or some type of dependency, but it's a component there. We have a mental health professional in our jail. I think today I looked, there was 5 different inmates on suicide watch that we were making sure that they don't commit suicide. It's a component. We are the largest mental health facility, de facto mental health facility, in the entire county is our jail, right? So we've invested resources there, and of course introduced Lisa as our mental health professional to help facilitate resources in Jefferson County outside the jail, but we also want them to liaison with the community, establish some of those relationships with the homeless population, so when there is an issue, we get compliance. Because if a deputy doesn't know them and they don't understand the issue, they are certainly going to handle it a lot differently. I will tell you how I handled crisis and conflict as a 21-year-old police officer was certainly different than how I handled crisis, conflict, and issues in my 30s and 40s. And I'm over 40 now. And so I handle it a little bit different as well. And then also, finally, there may come a point where if somebody's trespassing on your property, or MoDOT decides they've had enough, maybe they've heard from citizens who are complaining enough, and they decide to do it, we need to pull up the trash truck and get the crap out of here, right? Because at some point that has to happen. And regardless of how you feel about the homeless population, you might be very caring, you are committed to life, all of those things, there may be a point in time where the Sheriff's Department just has to be the bad guy and get rid of this stuff because they're hoarder and they keep collecting more and more and more, and it's going to become a problem. So that was our request for 2022. It's yet to go through the process, but I want you to know that we are aware of the issues, right? We get these calls for service. Our deputies come across homeless people. We have ever since I was on the road, back in the early 90s. We've come across these different populations, but it was very, very small. But I can tell you it's more and more visible in our county. I see it driving by, whether on duty or off duty. I'm always paying attention. I had to check on time because 2 things. I know from teaching police officers, mind can only absorb what the butt can take. We've been here 45 minutes. You might have had coffee or water before you got here. So I'm going to speed this up, right, when we get to questions. Because if you didn't realize, I can talk a lot. And I can go on. And I can go on. Sheriff's Department, we respond between 700 and 800 suicidal subjects annually. That's a lot, right? Some of those calls are our homeless population, but it's a small portion there. But we continue to invest in some of those things, basing our response on, again, there's that word prioritization. We have some people with mental health that are, when they come across law enforcement or they're not on their medications, are extremely violent to their community. They're extremely violent to us. Oftentimes, it's some level of force from our department to address it. We have people doing, cutting on themselves, we had somebody use a blowtorch on their privates. You're not talking sense into them when they're burning off their penis with a torch. We have a lot of different mental health issues, not only in Jefferson County, but as law enforcement. And so we continue to invest in that. Real quick, just a couple of things, some of our challenges. You saw some of the civil unrest last year. Jefferson County was very safe. We canceled all the vacation time off when all that was going on. We had some small groups that were committing burglaries into gun stores, and we want to make sure our police officers were safe and our community was safe. We canceled everything during those Floyd protests for a couple of weeks. I had calls from people in Cedar Hill who was concerned about Antifa coming down here. I trust you. I knew you had this. I wasn't even worried about Antifa coming to Cedar Hill. I knew this community would take care of it. So to ease your pain, we talked about that. But we've had some challenges. You've seen what a challenge it is for us to hire right now, law enforcement, for people who want to come into this profession. I'm really concerned about the future and where we have because of our job. We've heard about the law enforcement funding issue. If there is some good news, that is the dysfunction in St. Louis City and departments in St. Louis County have pushed good, seasoned, well-trained officers to Jefferson County. We've been the benefactor of all the defund talk, of not doing police work, etc. We have a community that supports us. We thank you. Our police officers thank you, and it gives them the opportunity to do